I like that. I'm sure Carl will. Today is May the 7th, 2019. It is about 5:34. We appreciate your attendance tonight. Calling this meeting of the Board of Education in order. This is our business meeting. I'm going to ask for a motion to go into executive session. It is anticipated the board will recess into executive session for the purpose of discussing matters related to the employment of a specific individual.
So moved.
Been moved by Vice President Elliott, seconded by Commissioner LeBron. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Ladies and gentlemen, you should, there's one note.
you can
Get
stay
that?
here.
Ladies and gentlemen, you should know that we will be convening executive session on this floor, but then when we recess, when we come out of executive session, we'll come back here and finish our business. So if you'd like to, you can just stick around. Thank you. And then we have the resolution.
So, since you got us up on
827.
Oh, you don't have to worry about,
Oh, that's true. Oh, yes, I totally forgot, yes. But I am worried.
Okay, right. You can move stuff within.
Oh, you saw, I'm ready to go. I'm not changing.
All right, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. We are back out of executive session. I'd like to do a pledge of allegiance, call on a student. Young lady there in the front. You right there. Raise your hand. You see you right there? Would you help us do the pledge? Okay, all right. Let's see if we can find some other young person. Linda Simmons, you're looking mighty young today. Come on, come on. Let's encourage Linda to come on up and help us with the pledge.
I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Let's give a round of applause for our wonderful Chief of Staff. She's awesome. Okay. Next item on the agenda is speakers addressing an agenda item. Madam Clerk, I think we have a total of 5 speakers for today. Is that right? Yes. Okay. And let's begin with Devith. I apologize if I mispronounced that. Garcia. I would remind everybody as Ms. Garcia approaches the stand that we have a 3-minute limit, and we ask that each speaker respect that time limit to ensure that others who are following you have the ample opportunity to address the board and address the folks in attendance here. Additionally, we have a very important agenda item on today, which we want to make sure we get to in a timely manner. That is the approval of the budget. So, Ms. Garcia, go ahead.
Good night. My name is Yvette Garcia. If we look closely at our society, we can realize that the only way to achieve change is by providing our children with a quality education system that meets each of their educational needs in an appropriate environment and with a necessary resource. They are entitled by the law to receive education and educational programs like art, music, and sport, not only for irregular kids, but also for the children in the special education program. Special education program services are essential in the development of these children who have a great potential. We must include, not exclude. We want and we must help the development better citizen, including each child. Support the students who are minorities and who are also discriminated against. I return and repeat, include, not exclude. We cannot cut the future of our children by cutting funds. It's easy for some to talk about what they do not know because they have no idea of what the parents of children in the special education program have to face on a daily basis, or how much some process take. But what will they do? You have to be in the position of a mother or father to understand. That is why, as a mother, I demand that you do not cut the budget and do not take away the right to receive the service and education they need. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Garcia will be followed by Howard Eagle, who will be followed by Candace Rubin. And I'd ask Ms. Rubin to stand to Mr. Eagle's left.
Good evening. Here we go again. More money, more money. So we're finding out that the search firm that you used our money to pay has botched the search process for the next superintendent. We knew, some of us knew the night when we sat here and heard the man who's leading the search say to Cynthia Elliott, when Cynthia Elliott said to him, asked him a question, he's standing right here where I'm standing now. What are you going to do about the fact that this board has a national reputation for being dysfunctional? What are you going to do? He said to her, nothing. Don't even worry about it. We knew that they should have been fired then. Now we're finding out that they botched the search process. We're also finding out that Van White has violated executive session. You know how they talk about executive session, how precious it is, how they got to go and discuss confidential information. It can't be discussed in public view. We're finding out that he told someone at Freddie Thomas this weekend that the reason that Dr. William Keller didn't get an interview is because he didn't finish his application, didn't finish the application process. We know that Commissioner Davis had asked them in executive session when we were asking her, why didn't Dr. Keller get an interview? She said that was done in executive session. I can't say nothing. But she asked them, can I tell the people? They're asking me, can I tell them? They said no. And then he violated that this weekend. He needs to be investigated. We're going to call for him to be investigated. In fact, they're playing around with this executive session like it's their own personal toy. They close the door, they're in executive session. They open the door, they're out of executive session, like it's a game, because they want to hide information from us. That's what they're doing. We would ask Carl K, but we know that, Carl, you don't communicate with us peons. You only communicate with big shots. We tried to talk to you at Freddie Thomas. The way you talked to us this weekend was very insulting, very paternalistic, very condescending. And we don't like it. We're going to call for you to be investigated too, because you're part of this. You're advising them. We would ask you what the rules are, but we know you're not going to tell us. I don't want to call you a liar, but let me tell you, look, so here we are, more money, more money. And you really think that we're going to entrust you with a nearly $1 billion budget to do right by our children when all of this corruption is happening and we're just beginning to find out the, how do they say, tip of the iceberg. There's deep stuff going on here. You know about it. We're going to call for some investigation. It's time for this to stop. You shouldn't even consider passing a budget. These people are not competent to oversee a $1 billion budget. They are not.
Thank you, Mr. Eagle. Candace Rubin will be followed by Natalie Luntz Martin.
Here I am back again also. And I forgot to mention the last time, we actually have one of your board members who's observed one of our teachers, Commissioner Elliott. So you can speak directly, I don't know if when you deliberate, you can speak directly about the value of RT. I believe you observed one who was working with a very multiply disabled student. Mm-hmm. So, okay, anyway, I wanted to bring that in, and I had a few other facts I wanted to start with, but there was something that happened today that shocked me very deeply. I wanted to speak about that. So I originally wanted to speak about the fact that we now have more than 10 subs, which again betrays the fact that we are not overstaffed. If we were overstaffed, we wouldn't have 10 subs working. And also remind everyone that using subs instead of our full-time employees at the beginning of the year is a violation of the Taylor Law. Anyway, I'd also be remiss if I didn't mention the fact that the projected layoffs of 2 teachers will leave us with no bilingual teachers. We get many students from Puerto Rico who are disabled, who can't just be plunked into a program. They have to be evaluated, observed. Usually the parents are, in a state of grief over the fact their child has disabilities. And our bilingual special ed teachers, fit that niche very well. We even have one, I think she spoke here last time, who served in the Peace Corps in Kenya years ago, and she speaks Swahili, and she had a disabled Congolese refugee student she was able to speak with. So we are more valuable than I think people realize. But the thing that I wanted to bring up, which was shocking, was, again, I stressed the last time, I think, that there are students who are being put back in schools when they're not ready, when they still have significant mental health issues that aren't under control. And again, I hadn't planned on saying this, but I met the mother of a student that I had earlier this year. I met the mother unexpectedly today. And her daughter was of flight risk, but she was a very talented girl. She worked with me for about 4 months. She worked with me. She worked with a lab teacher who came in, a social worker who came a couple of times a week, and a math specialist. And she bonded very well with us. She made special foods for us. I think we were the highlight of her day. She wouldn't do anything to disappoint us. She was doing very well, getting A's. And at a CSE meeting, there was a comment made about, well, she must not be making good progress if she's on home instruction. She would do better with the school, although there was no indication of that. Nonetheless, the mother took that to heart. She's a good mother, and she was placed in a school within 2 weeks, but she wasn't ready. She has bipolar disorder, and again, I'm afraid to say too much because I don't want to reveal this young woman's identity. But I found out today that she returned to school after the February break, and the mom said apparently she lasted a couple of weeks. She's been missing for 2 months. This is a 15-year-old girl missing, and I hate to tell you what I'm sure she is doing. So it's a safety risk to put these kids back in programs before they're ready. So I hope, again, I'm asking for, the restoration of our jobs, and I hope that will be considered. I have no self-interest in this. My job is not on the line, so thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Rubin. Natalie Luntz-Martin. She'll be followed by Karen Schaefer.
Hello, my name is Natalie Luntz-Martin, and I want you to know a little bit more about the value of home hospital instruction. Like all home hospital teachers, I'm New York State certified to teach, and many of my colleagues hold dual or even triple certifications. Our home hospital students might be in a health crisis or waiting for a new special ed placement and unable to go to a school building. We meet them where they are to help them continue their education. I typically work with elementary students. The kindergartners and first graders need rich early literacy experiences and need to build a strong foundation of numeracy as well. On a typical day, I may read my student a story, talk about the story together, then have them create their own version of the story in their own little book that they illustrate and dictate the words to me, and then they keep this book and read it to their families. One student recently was having trouble understanding rhyming. Sometimes he had it, sometimes he was confusing rhyme with other kinds of things. So I created something new, what I call a rhyme machine, to help him understand how rhyme works. You should have seen the look on his face when this clicked for him. He totally lit up. For math, we might play a number game, a how many game, to build and strengthen a young child's concept of numbers through 10. So I might take 5 blocks in my hand, shake them up, and they've counted. They know there's 5, and they'll pick one hand, they'll count out 3, and need to figure out how many are here. It's a game they love, and they love earning the chance to swap with me so that they kind of get to be the teacher and get a better understanding of this and a better sense of confidence in themselves with this. I had a student who just couldn't make that jump and was always guessing on the second hand, so I created a frame, which made it so he had a place to count out the blocks and was able to gain strength. We all do this all the time. We build bridges from where the students are to where we want to help them go. One recent student of mine was a 4th grade special ed student who was not yet reading and a very reluctant writer. He made such big strides working with one-on-one instruction. He began to feel more confident and believed that he actually could learn to read. His sight word vocabulary grew, his ability to decode and read words grew, and in the last couple weeks that he was with me, he made great progress in his writing. One day he told me how much he liked cactus plants, and with a little encouragement, I was able to help him build on something he was already deeply interested in, and he wrote 3 short sentences about the cactus plant. Soon after that, I brought him a tiny little plant. I mentioned to him that my husband had watered it for him, and he immediately said, "Oh, that was so nice. Can I write him a letter to thank him?" And he did. And he finished out that day by writing a letter to his NBA hero, Stephen Curry. He has since transitioned back to school. He's thriving in his new classroom. We've said that as a district, that we treat every child as if they're our own. Working with students one-on-one gives us the opportunity to do that. Thank you.
Thank you. And our final speaker today will be Karen Schaefer.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me? No? Can you hear me now? My name is Karen Schaefer, and I'm a special ed teacher with Home Hospital. We are a vital special ed program that provides instruction to the district's most educationally and medically fragile students across all classifications. Our school district has highly certified and incredibly talented special ed teachers in the elementary and secondary classrooms. The fact is, if our students were capable of being successful in a school setting, then they would still be in those classrooms. Even BOCES and Hillside won't consider placement for many of the students we serve. Our students' needs are complicated on many levels, and just like they require highly certified teachers and continuity in the classroom, they require highly certified teachers and continuity in our program, not transient substitute teachers who lack the experience and training our teachers have accumulated over the years. Home hospital teachers continually seek and share information and ideas with each other and the RCSD special ed community. Many of our students are severely disabled and don't have a voice, which is why we train closely with the match team, speech and PT, to incorporate assistive communication boards, devices, and software that meet their specific needs so they can learn to speak. Many of our students are on the autism spectrum, which may prevent them from interacting across social settings, especially in school, which is why we have workshops with the autism spectrum team to expand our assessment skills and target strategies to ease their anxiety during instruction so they can learn to engage and return to the classroom. All of our students' emotional behaviors interfere with their ability to participate in the learning process on some level, which is why we learn from the behavioral management team to identify triggers, de-escalate situations, and implement behavioral strategies so they can learn to self-monitor and return to the classroom when they're ready. Not only do our students thrive on home instruction, for many of our parents, we are the first positive relationship they have had with the school district in a very long time. Fostering relationships with parents deters litigation and improves overall satisfaction with the district. Hopefully, you are beginning to understand that our program has evolved over the years. Bottom line, we are not a suspension program. We are a critical component of the district's special education process that should be fostered and developed. We are a select group of highly specialized teachers that is disappearing, and the district needs to protect this last line of defense between education and dropping out. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, colleagues, that concludes our list of speakers addressing an agenda item. I wanted to, technology is an amazing thing. Commissioner Shepard, welcome. Can you hear us?
Yeah, I'm here. Can you hear me?
What state are you in? Where are you?
I'm in Syracuse, New York.
In New York, you said?
Syracuse.
Syracuse. Oh, you're not that far away.
No, yeah.
All right, well, thanks for tuning in. We appreciate that. And just for those who didn't know, she was able, through regular telephone, to participate in our executive session as well. So thank you for making that effort. And thanks to my colleagues who a few years ago changed the bylaws, which we have to do again, to allow for this kind of electronic participation. So a little bit of history. Before, we didn't have the amendment to our bylaws that would have allowed video conferencing. So thanks to those past colleagues that did that, and thanks to staff. And I want to say, it's not on an agenda item, but I know a lot of board members have expressed it. I've been on trial. I want to write a letter of appreciation because I know a lot of board members. Our media staff, our board staff, the district staff did an absolutely positively awesome job this weekend in the forums. They were well organized. They did a great job. And I know I've spoken to a number of board members. Yeah, there are things that we could improve always in this district. In any major organization, you can always have improvement. But I don't want any criticisms or things where we might have improved, like parent participation and community participation clearly needed to do better. It was not a reflection on the hard work that the staff did. They organized an on-time event. It was respectful of an event that was taking place at East High School. You know, sometimes our activities aren't coordinated and there's some overlapping. So on behalf of the board, really, and everybody, you know who you are. There's some people in this room right now. Dr. Lee, she kind of doing her work right now. But there's a lot of people in terms of organizational event. Carl, probably most people in this room. Thank you very, 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 very much. You did an excellent job. We had people who do all kinds of things in this district, served as moderators. You know who you are. You hustled, you worked hard, it was organized. Carlos, please thank all of your staff. So I think it's worth spending a few minutes to do that, and I know board members have individually thanked you all. So next item on the agenda would be consideration of resolutions. Why don't we see if we can resolve Resolution 828. That's a student suspension resolution. I think I'm allowed to say this. The resolution recommends following the superintendent's recommendation. We're not going to talk about it in detail here because it involves a student academic record. But how we're trying to proceed is, unless there are some detailed questions, we don't go into executive session on these because it's not necessary. But you could say to me, Van, I need to go into executive session. We're making the assumption that if you've got this material, you've had a chance to review it, and you have no opposition in this instance to upholding the superintendent's recommendation. Can I get a motion to discuss Resolution 828?
So moved.
Been moved by Commissioner Hallmark, seconded by Commissioner Powell. Any questions or comments? And again, I don't want to discourage going to executive session, but if there are no questions or comments, we can vote on this right now. There being no further questions or comments, all those in favor of Resolution 828, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposition?
I'll vote no because I have not read this suspension. So just because I have not read it, I'll vote no.
Thank you, Vice President Elliott. Madam Clerk, you recorded that vote? Next, I need a motion to discuss Resolution 827, the biggie. This is the 2019-2020 budget resolution. Is there a motion?
Point of order?
Yes, ma'am.
Do we want the superintendent to actually talk us through the presentation first?
Commissioner Powell correctly noted, thank you very much, that we, I'm sorry? No, that is on. Yeah, that's on for me. I don't know why. Thank you, though.
But if you want to vote right now.
No, I think Commissioner Powell had it right. Mr. Lowengaard, could you provide some presentation with respect to that budget, or have someone on your staff do that?
Okay. I promise this will be brief. Our CFO, Everton Sewell, will you come up? We have a short presentation for you. It's in the way of a summary.
Bless you.
Good evening, commissioners and fellow audience, community members. Wanted to walk you through the budget from the point of back in March, we presented the draft budget. In addition to the draft budget, you know, we had gotten some increase in revenue from the state, and we just wanted to walk you through where we were then and where we are now. Our district priorities remain the same, you know, being focused on racial equity, providing quality instruction, social and economical support, reducing the structural budget deficit, implement action plan for the distinguished educator, and increase graduation rate. Our next document basically highlights three categories. It compares the 2018-19 amended budget, which was $922 million. The draft budget that we presented was $925 million. And with the additional roughly $6 million, we got the 5.89. Now we have a budget of $931 million with a year-over-year change of about $9 million. So as we go into the budget, the next slide you will see where we talk about the general fund only as it relates to the state revenue, the city revenue, other local revenue, federal revenue, and the appropriated fund balance. Wanted to note as well that our appropriated fund balance remained at the $8 million that we started out with our draft budget. And as a result of the additional $6 million, we have gone from $784 million to $790 million. And that, again, is our general fund. Our expenditures, as aligned with our revenue for our general fund, and this is all fund. Again, the $931 million, year-over-year comparison of $9 million, with the $6 million difference in the total budget. So one of the things that we wanted to walk through is looking at what our draft budget was for our general fund, the $775.9 million. The increase where we see that of $6.5 million. There was the 5.89. There was an additional building aid revenue that we adjusted, and that's where the additional about $600,000 came in. What that is because of our FMP and the aid that we are projecting to get. There's some new development that came in with some of our projects, so we adjusted that. Again, appropriated fund balance remains at $8 million, bringing us to the $790.5 million, and our expenditures align with our budget, our revenue. Now, I wanted to also bring to the attention of everyone where we were with the number of FTEs. We started out 18-19 with 6,551.75. Our draft budget had shown 6,225.29, which was a difference of 326 positions that we reduced based upon changes that we had put in for the $5.8 million, actual total about 5.6. We have gone down to 295.26. So right now, the budget that we are presenting, the proposed budget, has a total FTE of 6,256.49 FTEs, which is a difference of 295.26. On the next page, you will see major impact since the draft budget, how we arrived at how we utilized the $5.6 million. Again, it's right before you, expanded learning. We restored some of the expanded learning from the general fund. As we stated in the draft budget, we had removed about $4.2 million of the general fund and only had the grant of the $3.4 million of grant, and we are restoring about $1.1 million. Coming into school, $400,000. Registrar, we restored 2 positions. Restorative practice, we have restored 10 positions. Contract for community schools, you will see this different schools. School number 3, 34, 45. Monroe in 17 to a total of $662,000. Professional development, the 500,000, and it goes on. The bottom piece where you see the benefits is because we've added all those FTEs, we've also added the associated benefits with that. So those are the major changes that we have had since the draft budget. And additionally, the 5 homeschool assistants that we have restored to the budget.
Can I ask a question? Can you guys hear me? I feel like the mic is off or down, but when you went back to the FTEs and you said initial draft was negative 326 positions,
Yes.
and then the final was 295.26, which is roughly around 31 positions.
Yes.
And then when we look at what was restored, I can only count 28 positions. Where are the other 3 positions in the difference?
So we
Like-
have
So you said 2 for
2
registrars,
for
10
registrar,
for restorative
so you're up to
practices.
12, 15, and 5, 20, 28. I know there was a 28. We had some corrections that we had for 2.6 for the schools. There were a couple positions that were omitted from the budget. And when we went back to the schools and looked at those, there was a 2.6 FTEs. So I know there was a 28 that we added, a 2.6, and I think that's it. The 20. That's the 30.6.
Yeah, but. No, those are for, are you counting for community school site coordinators? Because those positions haven't been hired yet, right? This was the addition for the mayor's request for community schools. This was the compromise here?
Those are not positions. Those are contracts that we are adding in.
Okay, so no, not those 4.
So we have the 28, which is the 10 and the 12 and 8. So we have 28. And as I mentioned, the 2.6, which is a correction of some of 2.6 positions that were left out of the budget when we were
The
looking at the school.
2.26, there's still kind of 1 position floating. I just would like to know, like, where the difference
Okay.
is.
No, the 31.2 you see here, that is the difference as you compare year over year. So if you take the 326 point, I think it's 46, and you subtract the 30.6, you will end up with the 295. So
Yeah, so I just want to repeat, initially in the 2019-20 draft budget, the FTE amount and the difference from the draft budget to the proposed budget and the year to change in the FTEs was 295.26, but initially it was 326. So I was just subtracting that from that, and I got 31 positions. And then if I look at the major impacts since the draft budget, I can count up to 28 positions. Just kind of want to know what happened to the other positions, of where they were placed at or restored. The other thing is the homeschool assistance attendance. I know that there were some email conversations about that, ensuring that there are 15 actual positions. That there was some confusion around what
okay.
was stated in the budget versus, so if we could get clarity around that. Go ahead. Benjamin.
Well, what happened with that is there were actually 19 in last year's budget, but we hired 20, still within the budget. So when we reduced them, when I cut 10 of them, then it's 10 from the 19, not the 20. So that's how we got to 9, and then we replaced it with 5 more. So that's how we get 14 positions, because there were never 20 positions in the budget to begin with.
But somebody was hired, and so there are 20 people, so what happens
Well-
to that 1 additional position?
And again, go ahead.
What happened is the homeschool assistants positions were over allocated by 1. So when we extract the data, we don't extract it by people, we extract it by positions. So when we pull the data, we only saw 9 positions, but there were actually 20 people sitting. So there was one position that was over allocated. So when we were running the numbers, we were running by FTEs, not by people. And so because I went back and investigated what happened, and that's what it was. One position was over allocated, so we hired one person more than we had FTE seats for.
So on that same subject, so breaking it down in terms of the reality, last year we had how many actually working here?
20 people.
20
still 20
people
people.
working as home
School assistants.
assistants.
For attendance,
Right, for attendance. This year, in this budget, how many will we have? 14?
14.
Right, and I know this is going to send chills down some folks' backs, but this budget does leave the ability, if necessary, to add later on. We can always make amendments. I'm not saying we're going to do that.
Okay.
But we have the flexibility to add, do we not? Because I think there's a concern that we added these in light of some of the difficulties we were having with making sure we could keep our eyes on our children. And I've yet to hear anybody say they weren't valuable in that regard. I'm just concerned sometimes, and I realize you guys have serious jobs as fiduciary agents, that we sometimes focus on the money, and that's appropriate, that's right, but if you're not focused on the children with the right resources, that's going to cost you more money down the road, like things that you can't compensate for, like children die, children don't get the help that they need. So I just want to make sure, and I've said this before, that while we have to make important financial decisions, and they should reflect our priorities and our needs. And if we're only reducing them from 19 to 14 or 20 to 14 because we just don't have the money, I dare to say there's not a person in this room that wouldn't really be concerned if we lost one child because we weren't on top of attendance. That's why these people were put there. So
Let me
I'm sorry.
just say.
Go ahead, Dan, you've been waiting that
One
opportunity.
other thing. Remember tonight what you're doing is approving a spending limit. So if you look at your yellow sheet, that is $931 million that you're approving. We have it broken down into lines, but there's also a contingency fund, which is over $1 million, and there's also $300,000 that's left in the $5.8 million. So that's all that the board they can change anything as long as they don't go over the spending limit. So it is somewhat of a compliment that we're down to one or two positions, but the board needs to know this isn't the last time that you have a chance to add or subtract, as long your adoption means that you're saying our spending limit is 931, and in the case that you really care about, it's in the general fund, because you can't really tell about grants and food service and some of our special aid. But again, we have 65 or 6,200 employees. If the board wishes a couple more of these, a couple less of that, that's well within the board's prerogative to tell me or the new superintendent, cut this, add this. Remember, it's a plan. It isn't a fixed kind of thing. It's to give you a limit, but you know, you couldn't spend $1 billion, as everybody said, but you can spend up to your limit.
Commissioner Powell?
I absolutely agree with everything that Dan just said about the what the resolution does. It communicates the board's commitment to a particular dollar value, all in as a total. And you know, our whole budget process has been, the vast majority of the spending has gone unquestioned. We accept that the administration has done their due diligence in setting those numbers and determining those numbers. What's here on this sheet, it's not up there, but on the major impacts since draft budget, is where our questions lie. It's where the restoration plan, that's where our questions, I think, still lie. And it's less than, you know, the difference between 99.44% pure and 100%, right?
That's correct.
I do have a suggestion for amending the plan that is laid forth on this page of the PowerPoint that would allow the board to give additional guidance. And I hope that we can do that before we actually cast our votes.
What
But I
page are you
do,
referring to? You said on this document.
the page that says major impacts since draft budget. I personally have a couple more questions about what's in the presentation first, and I do hope that the board will pass the dollar values in this resolution. I think that this is as good an opportunity as any to give Dan and his staff guidance on that last 0.00% of the budget, 0.001% of the budget. I think you know, we're down to that last little bit, and I think we can have that conversation. But I do have some more questions about this, and I think maybe other people do too.
Well, I don't see any right now, but
Okay.
go on ahead.
So question number one, the professional development for literacy curriculum and numeracy, that's not to be confused with the mayor's request for literacy aids, is that correct?
That's
So-
correct.
So your budget doesn't adjust, doesn't concede anything to City Hall on that point?
Yeah, the
Well,
community schools.
we heard late about the literacy aides. Now, these are students that are hired over the summer to work in the library.
Right.
And it was approximately
100,000, about roughly about, I think last time it was like $98,000, about $100,000.
And
we pay the
again,
city.
you have that money in contingency.
We have that.
And you also have that money still under the $5.8 million if the board chose to spend
Do
it
that.
on the summer literacy program.
And just to let you know, the summer literacy program is what we pay the city to hire our students. I think it's about 40 of them. But also removed from our budget is the students that we hire in our district that are from the school. So that is also out of our budget.
Okay. So we do hire students on an internship basis, separate and apart from the literacy aids?
During the summertime.
I understand that, thank you.
Can I just follow up on that?
Sure.
So you're saying that has been eliminated from the budget?
Yes, it's not in the budget for next year.
The
But there's a
literacy
request
aides have
from
not,
No.
are
City
not
Council to
included,
reinstate.
the literacy.
And it's a curious thing that the introduction of these literacy aids came from a former CFO of the city. So it was almost like,
Well, the his,
what I'm trying to say is, the city could just as easily hire these literacy aides out of its budget. In fact, they may have done something like that in past, you know, summer work hiring. That somehow we allowed, by virtue of having one of the city's former CFOs come over as our CFO, we somehow allowed them to talk us into spending our money on something that could just as easily have been the city's money.
let me just clarify that was not it. That's something that, as a result, I believe, of the monetization project, where we were having young people who wanted to work, and it actually came from me to suggest that we,
not the same.
is there a way in which we can hire some of our youth, you know, for the summer so that they have income? There's been in lack of a better word, a drought in terms of our teenagers being able to have employment, in particular employment for the summer. There's some, but there's not the level that we really need to have. And I'll go back, Ricky, to a comment that you made years ago when we were at a Christmas party. When we were growing up, we all had jobs in the summer. And so I think that we needed to have looked at that, and that's where that came from. How can we, because the city was limited, Rochester Works, I believe, was limited in terms of even their processes to hire our young people. So that's, I just wanted to give the historical context of that.
Oh, Van,
Willa, were you set?
I do have a different question.
Different question,
This
but
is
go
the
ahead.
same question.
yeah, I just want to clarify, Cynthia, Commissioner Elliott, that for your program that you're speaking about for advocating, that's still in the budget. It
Oh,
was
is
the
that still in?
literacy aids, or that's all the student
That's gone
employment?
too.
Both of them are out.
Both. Oh yeah, that's a problem for me then. Because I feel like there are higher positions and other cuts that we need to, let me just clarify this to make this statement now. I hear what you're saying, Dan, that we can make changes, but this is the voting and this is where we should do these changes that primarily, I don't like that we do change the budget throughout the year. It's like, what's the purpose of setting a budget if we can't stick with it? But I also want families in this district, because we're talking about a lot of individuals who are not high paid either. They're not making a ton of money as it is. These are not our chiefs and our executives and our ASAR staff. These are folks not making enough as it is, and I want people today to know that they still have a job and that they're going to be able to afford to pay their bills and support their families in the city, so.
Commissioner,
Go
I'm
ahead.
going to just take Commissioner Hallmark.
Yeah,
She has,
go ahead.
right.
Oh, and then Natalie, Commissioner.
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry, Commissioner Shepherd. Go ahead, Commissioner Hallmark. I'll get you next, I promise.
So I would actually, in contrast to you, Commissioner LeBron, I would not be in favor of tying the superintendent's hands. I think it's important to set the ceiling and beyond which we should not be spending. But if we set in stone something that we're thinking is appropriate right now, and then it's inflexible for the rest of the year, I think that causes problems. So I would not be in favor of not approving it because we haven't set in stone all of the specifics. I think that it is a little bit fluid, but as long as we stay under the ceiling, that's the appropriate role for the board.
Commissioner Shepherd.
So am I coming in clear?
Yep.
Okay, so my concern about passing a budget without having some clear understanding of where we're spending is the fact that we have to send it over to the city. And I would like for city council to understand what it is that they're actually going to be approving as well, which is why I also have a concern about even having this vote tonight, only because does the city understand that what they've asked in regards to the literacy aid, what that looks like in our budget and how we would reconfigure. I just want to make sure that we address their concerns before sending over a budget to them.
Okay.
Go ahead, Dan.
And if I can just respond, we could tonight decide to put 100,000 or 150 or whatever. I would caution you, and I want to do this in collaboration with the city. I want to work with the city, but it is your budget. And I'm willing to go over there, listen to them, and then come back to you and say they'd like X number in X. That doesn't stop you from 2 weeks from now modifying and all that. But again, it's your budget. We don't want to get into line item and that type. So if this is a particular area that you're concerned about, let's put a dollar amount behind it, 100, 200,000 for specifically summer employment, and then we'll listen to them if they've got an idea or whatever we've got an idea. The money is earmarked there, and you haven't gone over the numbers that you see in front of you.
Commissioner LeBron, and then I'll come back to you, Vice President.
Well, I just want to say too that this year's budget process is like night and day from last year. And I do want to reinforce the level of detail and work, Dan, that you and Linda do to the point where I have full trust and faith in your ability to not only oversee this budget process, but that you're not trying to hurt us intentionally in other ways, and that in the past has been my feeling with a previous individual. But so I want to thank you for that, because this has been a much smoother budget year for me, and also that you're always willing to answer questions, not just from the dais, but also as things come up in emails. There is one question, though, that I had Shanae submit at the last board budget meeting, and that is about the teachers that do the homeschool teachers. Because when we passed that policy in December, and again, you were not here for that, Dan, but in that policy, we did write that we would have quarterly reports on how many students were getting services, how many referrals were coming in, if there was a wait list, how students were selected, because that is an area that without that information and that data, I would have a hard time supporting any cuts, because if they have, and you heard here tonight, they have 10 subs, which I would prefer to invest in those 2 full-time staff that know curriculum and understand the district. Having been a sub myself and working with other subs, that sometimes is a barrier for students to get education straight through. And I have a problem with that too, if managing that is 10 subs. And we have not, I don't think we got a response back from that, Shanae?
I just sent it on to the administration. It was discussed at the last business meeting of the board.
Yeah, but that was like weeks ago. Okay, so I just want to throw that out there.
Dan?
And see, the one thing I'd be concerned about somebody saying 10 subs, is it because people are out or what's going on? But, and we'll never deny, you know, we've heard reports that we send kids back and all of that. That is administration, not the number of people, and we have to make sure. But again, if the board wishes, we could put money aside with the thought that, again, no kid would be without service, and again, stay under our cap, but have that money aside for those people.
Commissioner Hallmark?
So I don't think it's an either-or kind of thing. I mean, I agree that we should be getting these quarterly reports so that we can monitor and say, are we, you know, providing enough? But still, I would say, you know, the vote is about the total figure and a ceiling, and there could be some fluidity. Although, you know, if people really, really want to put a line item thing about a certain thing, I'd be okay, but I wouldn't want to see it on every single last thing here. There needs to be some fluidity for adjusting as we go throughout the year.
My next question was about the home hospital instruction, and
Commissioner Powell, before you do that, if you wouldn't mind if I just want to add a comment about the student work stuff. I'm generally in agreement that we should allow the superintendent some flexibility, but I also think, and I think you had said this before this meeting, Commissioner Powell, we should let the superintendent know where we want to make additions, because as he said, this is our budget. So again, I don't think there's a mutually exclusive approaches. While I am troubled by this notion that our mission is constantly expanding, we're being asked to do things that other folks won't do or can't afford to do. I do think one of the things we have to actually hold up when other divisions of government don't is employment, particularly for our young people. And so I don't know where everybody else is at with this, but when you talk about the facilities modernization piece that you talked about, the other piece, I think we should try to set aside some dollar amount. You tried to throw out a figure there, Dan, but while I know that is part of the mission creep, and I know that's going to add to our budget, our kids are really struggling. And how do we get them, many of them, to focus on their books if they are struggling financially? And And back in the day, you could work at Kodak and Xerox at Summers. I never did, but that was the hookup for many people. They had good paying jobs during the summer. And the city can't, unfortunately, employ all these kids. I think we have to do our part. So I don't know what that number is, but I would like to see some restoration of that. So that's in response to what you said, and also in response to what Dan said. Commissioner Powell?
Yeah, so when all the questions are out, I think there are 3 areas that we can have a conversation about and provide specific guidance to Dan and his team. But my third question around the home hospital instruction was, notwithstanding whether there are subs or not, the fact that there are budgeted reductions, my question is, based on the credentials of the teachers in home hospital, are there assurances that we're going to have special ed certified subs? Are there assurances that we're, at the end of this, we're going to have bilingual subs? That, I mean, I would hate for them all to be treated the same and to lose these specialty individuals from our district, even if conditions in September mean hiring back. I'd like to know that we're keeping these specialty certifications in-house as long as possible. Is that, are they treated differently within?
Yeah, the unfortunate part is when we reduce staff, that's done by last in, first out.
Regardless of the certification areas?
Regardless of certification area or bilingual or special ed in that. Although what the board has approved is the retirement incentive, so we're pretty close to that, looking at teachers, that 175 number. So we think our retirements are going to match that, so people will not be losing their job. I can't say it one for one yet, but we're awful close. Again, we're reducing our staff 295, and I've got to tell you that that's still not where we're going to have to be a year from now and 2 years from now, because the budget creep ends up putting us every year in a reduction mode without going into our fund balance, and our hope is not to do it. So the answer is yes, we're trying to save as many people as we can, but also if you want to put a little bit of that money so it's earmarked for those kind of things, I'm willing to do whatever the board's will is.
Commissioner Davis?
I have a question about the special education. I see that the 8 positions that were added, does that bring us to 24 or 28 that the plan had called for?
Okay, Keisha, what number are we at? The question was, what are our restorations or the total number of positions that are being...
You get it.
Good evening. The total number of new positions, that's inclusive of administrative positions and teacher assistant, teacher on special assignment, TOSA positions, is 31.8.
Okay.
And then just to let you know, I don't have a question more so about the figures, but about the meaning of the figure. I'd like to share a statement about that. I don't know when that comes in this process.
The meaning of which particular figure?
The meaning of the almost $1 billion figure is not the figure I want to address, but I'd like to address the meaning of that figure. And so when I say that now,
For the
Or asking
total
more
budget?
questions.
Why don't we finish going through the specific questions about additions and so forth, and then we can get to your more broader statement, is that what you? Yep. Anybody else have any other specific questions or additions?
I do also, and Commissioner Shepherd does. I think that we also have to keep in mind that City Hall is talking about a line item veto. And so I think we just have to, in terms of our own, process and that kind of thing, what impact if the city has the authority to do a line item veto, that may have some impact on our budget as well. And we are unclear at this point if they have the legal right to do that or not, number one, but if they do, that impact that that the mayor, the authority that the mayor and city council believes that they have with regard to a line item veto is something that this board will have to take into consideration and may have to come back and reconfigure this budget to the best that we can. So I'm not clear if that's going to happen, but I think that we need to be assured, understand that also.
Commissioner
So
LeBron?
just for clarity, I did want to add about that because when those conversations started, I did have a conversation with legal. So the other piece is that the $119 million that's given to the Rochester City School District from the city is not one line that says $119 million or $5 million from the city to pay for teachers, $10 million pays for our buildings. They would literally have to go through the entire exact, I mean, I think it's like looking for a needle in the haystack in terms of where the dollars are actually allocated throughout our entire budget. So I think it would be almost virtually possible to do, not to say that they couldn't, but the money, the $119 million is spread out. The other thing I will say too is that if you pull up the contracts that we pay with the city for SROs, for Pathways to Peace and other services, it almost equates to, if not more, than $119 million. And so I almost feel like, you know how you borrow money from someone and then you pay them back and you borrow it again? Like, we're just going back and forth with them, but they're charging us for services that is in the exact same amount or more, and people should know that too.
Dan?
And I would just say, I am not a lawyer, but for long time, cities, first of all, don't have the right to line item veto their own budget. So it'd be very strange if they have the right to line item ours, and as Cynthia said, we'd come back together if they did. But again, this is a spending limit. No one has said that their 119 has stayed the same for 14 years, and there is a maintenance of effort, otherwise it would go down. So we're fortunate to have the 119, but there's been no growth in that for a long time. So again, we want to work in collaboration with them. I am willing, and Everton and I are going to go over. We'll listen to them. We have a budget that has a little bit of room if there are things that they want, and you agree to them. But again, it's your budget. I'd come back and present it to you, and you decide.
Commissioner Shepherd?
So I'm really starting to feel the out of sight, out of mind.
Sorry.
Yeah, because you keep skipping over. Now I'm good. So I just wanted to ask, you said we could because they had some concerns specifically about literacy aids, you said that we could set aside money and then go talk to them afterward. So what would that look like? Would that mean that, and I'm just looking at the numbers here, would that mean that our operating expense on here would have to increase, and then we vote on that? And we vote on that? Can you explain that to me?
No.
And I can hear you. I just have to step away because I got to grab my charger before the computer dies.
Okay.
I can hear
Go
you.
ahead and respond.
Okay, no, I would not recommend that you move those numbers, but you have some contingency money and some money under the 5.8 that you haven't spent, and you could earmark that amount and still not change what you're approving tonight.
Commissioner Powell?
Yeah, I would have suggested, and may still, that there are 3 points that I'd like to see us talk about adding back from the major impacts page, and with specific identification of where the money would come from. If all of our other questions are out, I'm ready to make my first pitch.
Yep, go ahead.
Okay, so my first pitch is, I'd like to see us add back one more of the home school assistants, and bump it from 5 to 6, and pay for it from by reducing the board's personnel, but line item, using the breakage from our staff changes this fiscal year to pay for the one additional homeschool assistant. So that's my first proposal.
When you refer, so everybody else knows, when you talk about the breakage, that is between the person who is no longer going to be working here and the person who we bring in and that
The
high-level
expectation is that we will never spend as much money on our replacement as we're spending on our current.
And
Can I say something on the?
Certainly, nobody is valuable, but.
Commissioner Shepard?
Yeah, so, Commissioner Powell, are you talking of, when we're saying the home assistant attendants is that the staff that is, working with Bente? Or is that?
Correct.
Okay, because I'm getting titles mixed up right now. So I actually want to throw out there that we should restore all of them. And the reason why I'm saying that is because when we had people come in and speak about it, we also had the union president, Dan DeClemente, come in and speak about it. One thing that struck me on even reconsidering this is the fact that when they led with their argument, it wasn't about saving jobs. Like, they led with like the actual work that they're doing. They gave numbers and just the impact. And so I know that in one of our previous business meetings that I did say, well, we can take those duties that they've been advocating for and just place them in another position when I was talking about the parent liaisons. But then I thought more about it just in regards to the relationship piece. You can't transfer the relationship that the staff who are working in those positions, you can't transfer, like the relationship part is not transferable. And so I would like to suggest that we all come to agreement to add the rest, to restore all of the positions for the home attendants, just because of the work that they've been doing came at such a critical point. And a lot of times we find that we will put something into play, and then when we come to reevaluate it, we won't get a return on investment. And I think that through their advocacy, they've shown that we did get a return on investment with the work that they've done just in a short amount of time that they have been in place.
Well, I'm not treating that as a friendly amendment, because Bente themselves is not advocating for restoration of all of them. I'm advocating for the restoration of one, partly because that's what has been asked, and partly because I've identified a specific source to fund it from, and I don't think that source could support any more than one.
Dan, just hypothetically speaking, if you were to add, as Commissioner Shepard proposed, restore all, what would that cost?
I guess 156,000 about.
That would be 5, but if we restore the other one, then it will be another 31,000. So you're talking about $187,000 in addition to the 156.
To the benefits, yeah.
So, and just sticking with Commissioner Shepard's idea, if we, and going with your logic, if we were to restore those at a dollar value of 187,000, where would we look, and would our colleagues have the will to look in the budget for reducing another expenditure to sort of keep things, what you're not proposing?
We can always go and look for other reductions. I would fear that we'd have other people at the podium. You still have a contingency line of $1 million, and you still have about 300,000 under the 5.8. So if you wanted to spend about 200,000 of it to replace home school assistants, then you still have other money to do some of the other things I heard you say about summer work program too. So maybe you want to do a little less of one and a little more of the other.
This is just my last comment about the homeschool assistance. It's not, I don't want folks to misinterpret the conversation here. Something happened a year or so ago, and we responded, the administration responded to what they thought was our schools needed to protect our kids and stay on top of our kids. What Commissioner Shepard is saying is, when they came in here, those employees, they presented what they were doing to protect our kids. I have not heard, and maybe we should have this discussion, I've not heard anybody say that we didn't get a return, as Commissioner Shepard says, a return on our investment. This is probably one of the most important things that we could do to keep our eyes on our children. So I'm just concerned, and I've said this before, I sound like a broken record, that sometimes, and I get where you guys are at, sometimes we're making decisions because the finances require it, but remember the old commercial, pay me now or pay me later. I just want to make sure we're making the right decisions. Do we need 14 homeschool assistants?
50.
Maybe we don't. Do we need 20 homeschool assistants? And I guess rather than Everton answering that question, can you or someone on your staff tell us whether we need 14? I want to know what we actually need. And I'm, just me, I'm willing to pay for that. But before I go to the next person, is there someone other than Everton who substantively can answer the question, do we need 14, 16, 17, or 20 homeschool assistants?
Beth or Celia, I don't know if I want to put you in that spot. I mean,
no, but he's not there. I'm talking about from the administration. Okay.
Yes, in discussing it with Dr. Golden very briefly, but the 5 would restore us, where when I talked to Betsy Hoffer, the attendance director today, she felt as though that would meet her needs, and she has a plan that she's developing to where the 15 would be dispersed across the district for next year. Second thing is the 15. Thinking
There's not 15, there's 14.
14,
There's the
excuse
back
me,
and forth.
I apologize.
We're trying to restore it to 15, though.
Okay, so the 5 additional, that's where I was at.
6, but
Or
If I could
6.
just get a point of
no, 5
clarification.
wait. 5 additional takes, that's what's in the budget now, takes us to 14. The board's asking you,
For 15.
should it go to 19 or even 20?
But also, I'm sorry, Dan, before we continue, the first conversation was for clarification, was 15, because there was, I understand what you guys are saying, that you were budgeted for 19, but there happens to be 20 people, but at the end of the day, whether we budgeted for 19, we still have 20 people, and that's what we're talking about, is do we cut it? I know you said 5, but I would like us to have a conversation from 15 or 20, because I don't want us to go below 15.
But this was my question. Dan, you had it right. Without regard to where we were at, where we could be, I want to know, just for a moment, without regard to money, what do our children actually need? Do they need 14, 15, 16, 19? I'm speaking of, Commissioner Elliott, this is what I'm speaking of, because I know this is your question. I'm speaking of homeschool assistants, the attendance folks that came in here.
No, I was thinking we were talking about the people that work with our home health.
No, that's not the
We're not talking
conversation.
about.
No. So
Yeah, that's
if
why
we
I had to
could,
clarify,
yeah. No, if we could stick with, because this is just my question. I'm not talking about money. Now that we know who we're talking about homeschool assistants who drive and monitor and put eyes on our children. We offered them up for a specific purpose, and I'm asking you, without regard to money, how many do we need? 14, 15, 16, 17, 27? Tell me.
Today, when I spoke with the attendance director, we talked about the additional 5, wherever that math ends up, that would be adequate, and we're working on a plan to put those 15 in place across the district. And we are working together with Dr. Golden, because we were working on this prior, about parent liaisons and homeschool assistants in the school and doing more collaboration for next year that we didn't do this year in our first. We did, but we'll do it more formally next year in our plan, given this was just our first year of implementation.
So you think you can go from 20 to 15?
Yes.
Because you're going to have greater collaboration and coordination between these home assistants and other staff?
Yes, and we're going to clean up our plan. Some schools will differentiate more than we did last year.
Okay, so
So
Commissioner
that's one additional.
That's one additional from what you're proposing. From this. Dan is proposing 5, we're proposing 6. The one additional, yeah. So I just want to have a conversation about the statement of return of investment. I have not seen any data on the return of investment, but what I will say is when they came out here and spoke, I understand the value of home visiting and outreach, because again, this is what I do during the day. But we are required to collect lots of data on my home visits and my outcomes and correlations from everything from even blood pressures to ED outcomes and emergency room usage. So there is a lot of data collection on my end. I have to be able to prove my position and my role at the hospital. And I would like this district to go in the direction that one day. I want us to all go into that data-driven direction when we make decisions like this, because while we're advocating for 20, right, I can't say that I have the data. I heard them. I understand that oftentimes the work that they're doing is undervalued in organizations, even though there is a return on investment, right? But I would like us to, and even with the collaboration, start collecting those data. I would like to know the number of home visits that they're doing, the outcomes, the number of referrals, and we should have a system of documentation in the students' files, not just with social workers and teachers, but having them be allowed to document as well.
Just for clarity, we do have that data, and I can provide it after, at another point, but we definitely have the home visits, the calls.
Please, Sid. Go ahead.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
Yeah, Commissioner Shepard?
Yeah, and I want to say, I think Dr. Massetti Miller just said it, that we do have the data on that, and that's why I said that I've been able to prove that the return on investment, that it works, like the relationship that these staff are having with our kids and families, that it actually works. And I think in one of the comments that were made throughout the budget process, that data was broken down to us on actually how many home visits they did, how many phone calls staff were doing. I mean, it was given to us. And so that's why I'm advocating to restore all of those positions, because from that data that I received, that it was very beneficial. And I'm with you, President White, on this. I know that you guys were having a conversation at 15 earlier, because or 14 earlier, because that is what you were working with. But at this moment, and I'll just ask again for clarity, I mean, your answer can stand, but at this moment, if you feel we need more positions there, like, I would like to know, like, is the need there? And I understand you're going to collaborate with other staff. Do you honestly think that is going to fill in the gap that we have in that area?
I feel comfortable. Oh, go ahead.
No,
Superintendent.
I do feel comfortable if you wanted to go to 15, but again, we'd look at reports, and if the board felt, well, that's not enough, then we'd go and hire even more.
So can I just add for clarification? I remember the data that was presented on the number of home visits and phone calls, but that doesn't equate to outcomes for me. I would like to see the correlation of the number of home visits, phone calls, again, I understand the work. I do this for a living. However, I still need to
Absolutely.
see a correlation of the outcomes for me to feel confident in using the return of investment statement. I need to see it, and that correlates as outcomes.
Understood,
And the-
and we need to determine the metric for the return on investment for
Yes.
that,
The
absolutely.
metric is improved attendance. That's the metric.
Thank you,
And
thank
the other piece is that parent liaisons and others have to take a more active role and teachers and administrators, everybody, it's a piece of their responsibility, making sure the kids are here.
Yeah, so can I just say though, Dan, for the outcomes, the metrics being attendance, that wasn't presented, and I still don't know if that's a correlation. We can have a student that had social work and now, and one home visit, and yeah, maybe that combination, or we don't know those things because we're not properly, at this time, capturing that data in the way that paints that picture. So I hear you, and that could be a metrics that we measure to look at as a correlation, but I would just like to see that clearly done.
Vice President Elliott?
Yeah, I would just say that, I would just remind my colleagues is that we have scarce resources, and so, you know, we have to ensure, and I feel part of the pressure because, you know, the community, state levels, they're saying, you know, this is $1 billion budget, and this is just the operating budget, not the capital funding. And so, and we've always said we need more money, more money, more money. And I do think that we have to look at how efficient and how effective that we're being before we go and ask for more money, so that we really understand what we're asking when we ask for funding, that we are directing that funding in the right way that's going to have the impact on student achievement. And I was also, but Commissioner LeBron, you hit it, you know, just because they've made phone calls and just because they've made visits, are we having an impact, and is there the impact on improved attendance? That's what we have to be looking at, because I think that we've done it that way for so long, and that's not to say that they're not working. But what that is to say is that, as what has been saying, are we getting a significant rate of return based on the metric? That's the question that we need to look at. And so I don't want us, and there's a union representative here, I know in this case that that's not what Dan is saying, but we just can't be protecting jobs just to protect jobs. They've got to have impact. Or we're going to continue to ask for all this money. We're going to continue to get this pressure from this community that we've got $1 billion and we can't educate Black and brown children. So we have to focus it. We have to focus it that is having the kind of impact. I would not necessarily want to go to the state and ask for more money right now, because we haven't really did an analysis to find out really, are we, and I would argue we're not, are we properly spending the dollars that the taxpayers have entrusted us with?
So I would like to see if I can bridge this conversation from a discussion of what we could do with what we should do. I'm in total agreement, and to be honest, it's pretty amazing that, and the current administration doesn't have to own this, that we would set up something like this, have 19, 20 employees, and not only and not have lagging and leading indicators. We should know, not only when we set this up, what we were going to measure. We were going to measure attendance, but we were also going to measure outcomes. And so what I would suggest, while I'm completely sympathetic to Commissioner Shepard's argument, I don't know that we have, while there's anecdotal evidence and while there is evidence relating to attendance, I don't know that there's a comprehensive measurement tool for the success of this investment. So what I would suggest is that we maybe take the difference between from the board and use that to hire another home school assistant that will bring us to 6, and give ourselves, or give yourselves, a period of 3 months or whatever it is to put together an analysis for us to tell us whether we need those 19 or 20. I suspect we do, but I'm with people who say, hey, listen, I want some proof of that. And if it is that we need the additional 4, well, at that point, it would be additional 4 workers?
It would be 5.
5. At that point, if we didn't have the money, extra money, we would have to figure out where we would have to take it from, get additional reductions. But right now, what I'm proposing is we, hire the 6th. If we have to do it through the difference in the salaries, we do that. And then we say to you and your successor, by November or whatever, you got to tell us whether this investment is working.
Well, and I think it could be before then. It could be done in the next couple of months, so in September, you'd know what you needed.
Commissioner Shepard, what do you think of that idea?
I'm cool with that.
Okay.
Okay, does that make sense to everybody? Okay, all right. So you get one.
I know we haven't actually cast votes, but
Well-
I'm counting more than 4.
Okay,
Yeah.
but again, this is spending.
Yeah.
We'll add the 1 in, but it still doesn't change the yellow sheet. Now, do we want to do something with the summer work and the jobs, the literacy, and how much do you want towards that?
So I want to support literacy aids too, because that is summer employment for students. And again, I hate that the positions that we're talking about cutting are really low-hanging fruit positions. And I'm with you and Commissioner Elliott on this whole budget thing. I think that, and I've said this many, many times, this deficit is not just going to magically disappear no matter what, even though we got $6 million more from the state. The debt increases every single year for us for compounded factors and reasons. So we do need to start, as soon as this budget passes, start having really open and honest conversations with the community, with district employees about our outlook and where we're at, what's predicted, and what we're gonna potentially have to do. Because one thing I hated as a parent in this district, having experienced this twice, is being told a month after school started that my child's school was closing. And that I had a big issue with, and that happened to me twice. Not with you, Dan, not with you. I just want to throw that out there. But, that has a profound impact on a parent and a student, especially when you're planning your whole entire life around a school. So I just want to throw that out there. I do have to step out for a minute, you guys. I got to pick up Sophia. She's downstairs.
Take a vote while you're gone, no.
I've already made it clear that my first choice would not be to add back. However, if the board is considering it that, then my next question is, what's the threshold? How many dollars? And I would suggest that the offset specifically come from contingency.
Okay, well, and we'll work that out, but without rise and above. So would you say the literacy, 100,000?
Let me just, to interject here, let me just try to understand it. With the literacy, they're going to be working during the summer. These are our students.
Yes.
Okay, so I'm not necessarily advocating for both. I will just, if it's the literacy, I'm okay with that. Commissioner LeBron went out.
So
As compared to
is
No, she
we're
means
not at
the
the
other-
home aids yet.
the other
You were talking
employment.
about summer employment for our
Summer
young people.
employment is-
There's money funded for literacy, for our literacy aids,
Okay.
and then we
All
had
right,
some.
so it seems as if, I know Commissioner LeBron stepped out, but I think she made it clear, she would support the literacy restoration or the identification of funds for literacy. Dan, you put that at about $100,000, but again, you're dealing with this yellow sheet, and you'll make it happen
I'll
within this
make
yellow sheet.
sure that we don't go over. So right now, we'll put 100,000 towards it, and we'll still have some wiggle room to come back to.
And what Vice President Elliott has said is, we were talking about 2 buckets of summer jobs or jobs. One was literacy and one was related to the FMP. She's saying, hey, listen, just so long as you help our children get jobs. Good with that. So I think there's consensus around it.
Okay. Now,
Commissioner Hallmark, will you go with that?
we have one more topic, though.
Well,
Sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry.
Out of sight, out of mind. Commissioner Shepard.
I just wanted to clarify one more time with you, Dan. You're saying we're gonna set aside 100,000, but it's gonna come from the contingency or wherever you can find it from for the literacy aids. We're not gonna add it onto this resolution?
No, it doesn't go above the yellow sheet, but it'll come, again, we're still under the 5.8 million. And so
Yeah.
anything left will go into the contingency, so that's where we've got about 300,000 in that 5.8 left,
Okay.
okay?
Excuse me, the other thing I wanted to add is, I know, Dan, you have been talking about communicating with City Hall.
Right.
There's this concern about the line item veto and what they might do. I know you've been talking to the folks at City Hall. I actually have been talking to a colleague of ours, a former colleague of ours, Malik Evans, who, as a result of some changes over there at City Hall, he is now chair of the Finance Committee. And I have asked him, and he said he was going to communicate with you regarding getting an understanding about what City Hall needed. What he told me in a recent conversation is they were really concerned about community schools. And I asked him, I said, well, I know Dan and his team, with the support of the board, has up the ante, so to speak, in that area. So I think for those of you concerned about what City Hall might do, line item veto and so forth, there is conversation between City Hall and 131 West Broad Street. So.
Okay, so we've got two. Is there a third of it? See, again, the young mothers in homeschool and that aren't listed here because we kept them where they were, I think, right? Isn't that correct? Help me out here. The only thing we were talking about, we're clear on that.
In the home hospital? Are you talking the home hospital?
Home hospital, where is that? What have we done with that?
That we actually reduced about 8.25 FTEs. It was 28.25, and we are now at 20 in next year's budget.
So reduce them 8, and
And a quarter.
the cost of some of them back beyond the 8 would be what?
It is about an average salary of 65,000 per homeschool assistant, home hospital. With benefits, it's about $95,000 per person.
Okay, and again, we're not going to deprive a student of services. You need to know that. But do you want some put back in that category, or we'll just wait and see? You're going to have hundreds,
But,
you know.
can I just ask how much is the sub cost? So if there's 10 subs, how much are we paying the subs? I know that there's a tier system for the sub payment, but
It's average about, I think about $200 per day for a sub.
yeah, depending on the tier, but if they're a long-term sub and depending on how long they've been, it's a little bit more.
Right.
But if there's 10 of them, and how long are they being contracted to sub? That has an impact on cost too. We could find that out.
Harry, do you know
It's about,
specifically of this, whether, one, they're permanent sort of subs,
Yeah,
or
are there any
this is
long-term
because
subs from
people
that
are subbing
department?
because they're out?
Yeah, that's a good point. Those are different subs.
Good morning, Commissioner. Good
Good
afternoon,
morning. Good
Commissioners.
Good
I was
morning.
sleeping back there. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I was sleeping back there.
I repeated it too. Good morning.
But no, roughly right. The cost is roughly right, about $210 per day for the per diem subs. Again, I'd have to go back and really pull the data to really give you specific information
Yeah.
on that particular group of subbing. But and I'd be more than happy to pull that information and come back to you. Okay.
Yeah.
Would you want another $100,000 for them, and then Harry will come back to you, but the money will be allocated?
Yeah, because I feel like couldn't the money be allocated if we maintain our staff and then?
Well,
Yeah.
maintaining our staff.
Maintaining
would
our
be-
staff, but cutting our subs. That's what I mean,
Well,
we need to
Of course,
see.
we do that,
Yeah,
but
that's,
it
that's
would
ideally
be
what you want to do.
way above that,
Right.
because if it'd be about $800,000 less the subs, but you're still at $500,000 or so.
See, this is just my observation of this most recent part of the conversation. I think it is one of the reasons why we need to leave the flexibility in the yellow sheet for our administration. I worry that these are great questions, Commissioner LeBron especially, appreciate the detailed financial analysis that you bring to it. I'm concerned, though, that we're in some aspects, drawing a budget right here. And I just think that that's probably not wise, and that maybe we ought to, in this regard, in this instance, leave the space that Dan needs in I'm looking for the yellow sheet.
Yeah, I agree.
Right? So that he can make decisions. I mean, because to be talking to Harry and Everton and, right? Well,
I agree, I agree.
thanks.
The decision is yours. I just want to keep saying that you can have a presentation in more detail on the home health care, and you still have a little bit of money to do it. Would be back to you to decide.
Commissioner Powell?
Yes, thank you. While I felt it was important to have very specific conversations about the first two items, I totally agree with what President White just said about, I trust from what Dan just said, that he heard my concerns about whether we had special ed folks, certified people in our home hospital, that we had bilingual people in our home hospital. And having heard that conversation, I trust that he's going to do the right thing. I don't know what the right staffing threshold is. I agree with Commissioner LeBron that if we're leaning as heavily on subs as we are, that maybe we don't have the right threshold right now, much less going into a new fiscal year. But one thing that I am comfortable about is that we as a board have been heard on this point, and that Dan and his people will do the right thing.
Well, and we'll bring it back for you guys to decide.
So can I just add to Van, one, I trust you too, Dan. I just want to make sure there's a record of these conversations, and this is why I like to personally bring stuff out at the dais and have these conversations, so that a few months from now, if you're not here and someone else is here, and maybe some of the administration may have forgotten that we've had these conversations, I can pull this video up and say these were the things that were discussed and advocated for. So I just want to put that out there, but I trust you too, Dan.
All right. Yes, Reverend Davis, this might be the time.
Good time to.
Right.
Yes. I too, I'm for the changes that we have discussed. I've talked about wanting to fund special education and the homeschool assistance. And, but the one thing I have to uplift that I'd like to be heard on that we haven't discussed is in the budget book, it says that there's budget policy 6110. And it states that the budget shall be designed to reflect the district's strategic plan for the education of our students. So I want us to understand that this money, what its meaning is. This is money that we're investing for the education of our students, and it's to be invested in accord with a strategic plan. In the beginning of this process, I asked, do we have a strategic plan? And I know that I've heard that we had 4, or from Dr. Aquino's report, we understand that the path forward that was the strategic plan was never completed and is not implementable. So my concern is the meaning of this money. Is it being applied in a way to bring about the improvement of student achievement when there's actually no plan that it's aligned with? So we know from Commissioner Elia's most recent communication that while the district addressed the distinguished educators' recommendations, the district was also vague in its implementation action steps. In one of its most important areas, teaching and learning, Commissioner Elia states that the district essentially outlined a plan to plan. In addition, the commissioner highlighted that missing from the plan was a statement of the district's overarching vision for improving student achievement, how the district's operational and financial functions will align their work as part of the vision of student achievement, and how senior district leadership will monitor and evaluate implementation of the recommendations across departments. So I want to leave for us to think about and to consider, what does it mean to have a budget when there's no accompanying plan for how to effectively use the resources we just discussed to promote student achievement? I want to lift up and remind us of the DE's report and other reports. In 2008, not in regard to the whole district, but only in regard to special education, an evaluation of programming was conducted and many recommendations for improvement were outlined. Yet by 2013, this district was ordering another evaluation of special education. That means from 2008 or 9 to 2013, if you multiply the years by 365 days, that means like over 1,000 days passed, and the board, the superintendent, central office, principals, assistant principals, and teachers rolled on with district processes without noticing that none of the recommendations were being addressed. I want to understand, how does that happen? Do we all understand, how does it happen that 4 years go by and none of the recommendations in regard to special education are addressed? Right now, we're not talking about just one area, we're talking about the entire district-wide plan for all of our areas. If we don't know how that happened, that those recommendations were never implemented, how can we safeguard now that this budget and these monies are going to be used in a way to actually bring about and to satisfy the recommendations that we have for the entire district? So another 1,460 days passed between 2013 and 2017. Again, the special education recommendations not being addressed. Again, that's just one area. We're now talking about 9 areas across the district. So I want us to think about, what does it mean to have a budget when we don't know if what is being funded is effective at improving student achievement? We learned that a K-2 curriculum was not appropriate for use with students. So this is my question. We have a budget, but does that budget actually contain the resources that are needed to create student improvement? Have we evaluated our programs? Do we know that they're actually doing what we think they are? So I understand that we have the top figure here and we can move things around to address all the concerns that we have, but we have to companion that with a reality that this district, just in one area, from 2008 to 2017, had recommendations, and from the board down, those recommendations were not implemented. How does that happen? And how are we going to guarantee that doesn't happen in 2019-20 with these monies? That's my question that I would like to understand.
So I want to speak right away and say, historically, not only has the board had different players, but different superintendents. Some, what I would argue and have argued, were ineffective. Some of them that you yourself, one of them you praise yourself. But what I will say is that you are now part of this board. And so how does this happen? You looked at this budget. You had a responsibility, just like all of us, not only to ask those questions in the beginning of the budget process and the beginning of your term, but these are questions you can continue to ask. There's no reason that this is the end-all, be-all of asking those questions. I ask endless questions in this district, and I don't care who gets offended, whether it's the superintendent or another board member. I'm gonna ask critical questions that I feel need to be asked. That's one. The second piece of this is that, and I don't want to put Ruth and Keisha on the table, but we didn't have restorative practices back then on the dates that you're talking about, which is why this community has come forward, not only to protect the investment of restorative practices, but to ensure that the board understands the value of it, and that not only do we not cut it, but that we allow it to grow and expand in this district. We didn't have that practice at all. Back then, students were suspended, yes, for any little singular thing in any school. There is much, much work in this district that still has to happen. There have also been numerous deputies and chiefs, and I cannot stress this enough, in the last 2.5 years alone, that is a leadership problem. When you have deputies and chiefs coming in and out in a short amount of time, that is a direct leadership problem to the superintendent that's here. You guys can, I'm having a conversation, so always interrupting. Bye, 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 thank you, have a good night, bye. I know, but it's so ridiculous. You guys are not on this board, have a good night, be quiet, thank you very much, it's mad annoying. No, it's so annoying. Like, how old are they, how old are they, how old are they? I'm younger than you guys, and you guys are grandparent ages, acting like children every single time, every single meeting. That's why you guys gotta get a life. No, I'm done. All right, go ahead, Ben, I'm done. If she asking questions that she is not a part of the board, she needs to be a part of the solution.
Beatrice, hold on. We're talking.
I have lots of answers. You have no answers. As a matter of fact, you can't even pay your bills. You were sued. You were sued by the bank a year ago, but you got the audacity to ask the board how they can budget $1 million, and you're getting sued by a bank. Pay your bills, sir.
Beatrice, listen.
Now you repetition.
Listen,
40 years of repetition and disruption, and you haven't accomplished nothing in this community.
Ladies and gentlemen, we have, ladies and gentlemen.
Bye. Go get that neck checked out. How about
Wait a
that?
second. No, Beatrice, come on now. Listen. Beatrice, listen, we have, listen. Folks, we have, Beatrice, don't talk to them. Listen, we're talking, Beatrice, come on now. We have a job to do here. And that job, Beatrice, I have the floor. Ladies and gentlemen, we have a job to do here, and our job is to focus on children and making sure the resources are available for our children. Now, Beatrice.
I don't make statements that are not true.
Yep. Beatrice, listen, I'm going to have to cut this meeting short, and the problem with that will be children who need services will not get them. We should all, no matter where we're at on the spectrum, we should all be concerned about children. That's what this budget is about. It's not about us adults disagreeing. Shh, please. This is about children, folks. Not us adults, it's about children. So let me just refocus my comments with respect to something my colleague said. And to you, Reverend Davis. I would agree that there have been lapses in the performance of lots of folks in this building and beyond, across the city, in terms of servicing people. I would also agree that we had, chronologically, a plan, an action plan that expired in 2018. That was our last strategic plan. It expired in 2018. I think Barbara was somewhat working on the path forward. Sometimes she would call it a strategic plan, sometimes she did not. I've heard people refer to it as a facilities plan. But the bottom reality is, our last superintendent was Bohan Vargas, had one until 2018. The question is, should we have one now? And everybody agrees, but we don't. So the focus on all of our parts have to be, how do we make that happen? We have a response to the Distinguished Educators Report that calls on us to make sure we update the one from 2018 or create a new one. We know, because you've participated in the meeting, everybody knows, that Linda Simmons our chief of staff is working on a plan to devise that. But as everybody knows here, we cannot wait for the development of a strategic plan because, one, we want our new superintendent to have a say in that. Two, I think most of us would agree, the community really needs to participate in the development of a strategic plan. So, but in the meantime, we have budgetary mandates that require timeline mandates, children that have needs that require that we pass this budget now. That doesn't mean, as you say, Commissioner Davis, that budget shouldn't be brought in alignment with a strategic plan. But we don't have an updated one right now. We're working on it. Everybody here saw what Linda and Dan were working on in terms of strategic plan. We are working on that. And it's a plan that will include our new superintendent and include the community. But in the meantime, as I think Commissioner LeBron and others would probably agree, and you as well, Commissioner Davis, we have a job to do. We have to pass this budget. So, I'm not finished, and then I'll recognize you. In terms of recognizing that the work must continue, for example, as Carl knows, our general counsel knows, and the board has recognized that while we, as a district, did not move the ball forward sufficiently in the area of special education, which you point out, work has happened in that area. You know that. Everybody on this dais knows this. We've made some significant inroads in trying to address that problem so that no longer can we say we're not addressing special education. And as Commissioner LeBron has pointed out, we have made significant inroads in the area of restorative practices. This budget not only reflects our priorities in special education, because we made sure that this budget was brought in alignment with some of our special education needs, but as everybody on this dais and this audience knows, this budget also restored, these are just two small examples, restored our funding to restorative practices. So while we are working on this very important thing called a strategic plan, which does require diligent work over a period of time, we've got work to do. And this is what this budget reflects. Are there any other additions or comments regarding this budget?
I wanted to say that
Yes.
my point, again, is, and I am acting as a commissioner when I make this point, the point is somehow what's recommended and what's on paper doesn't happen. So I'm asking the question, if we could have an understanding of how that happens, we can guard against that at this point in juncture. I'm really afraid that at this time next year, I may not be here, but this time next year, whoever the new person is, they're going to start asking the same questions that I'm asking now. So that's really my point. If you don't understand how you got here, then how can you understand what needs to be different now? I don't see anything different now. I don't see anything in place to ensure that that from the board down, again, we'll roll on with the processes and not realize what we haven't accomplished. And so that was my point.
Let's start down here, Commissioner Powell.
Thank you. I don't want this meeting to end without lifting up all of the administrators in this room, with Everton as our CFO for guiding the budget process through. I give my profound thanks to everyone. I was afraid that we might not actually remember to give that thanks, but you've all done yeoman's work to make that happen. I also want to lift up my colleagues and talk about how this major impacts page, the work of Dan and his people in restoring based on the feedback that the community gave, that the board gave. And finally, I want to hold up how collaborative a process it was, just talking about the summer literacy aides and the home school assistants. That was a give and take, and I saw collaboration that I didn't see this time last year. We had a vote of, it was a 5-4, it was a 4-3 vote on the budget last year. I don't think we're going to have that this time. Why? Because we had collaboration and a meeting of the minds. It's a premature, but I I'm ready to celebrate a passed budget by a larger margin than we had last year.
Vice President Elliott?
Yeah, I direct this to Commissioner Davis. I think you're brilliant. I think you're totally brilliant. I think that your voice lends something to this board. And I'm hoping that while we talk about disruption, I hope it's constructive disruption as opposed to destructive disruption. And so while I think you have so much to lend to us, but it's got to be constructive disruption and not destructive disruption. So I'm looking forward to continue to work with you because part of the issue, I believe, is that we didn't have your skill set before. But it's got to be used in a constructive manner to disrupt, not a destructive manner. And so while I appreciate what you offered, but let's do it constructively where we're working together. I thought the point of us and the point of community involvement was that we can do it right, not always saying what we're not doing correctly. Yeah, we know that. Could it be that I may not have the skill set, but you come with the skill set? Let's look at it from that perspective. Thank you.
Commissioner Hallmark? All right. So
President
I'm going to
White.
call the question.
President White.
I'll call the question. Can I get a motion to vote on
President
Resolution
White.
8? Oh, I'm
President
sorry.
White.
Commissioner Shepard. Wait. Commissioner Shepard, go ahead.
So I just wanted to reference back to the budget policy that Commissioner Davis brought up. And I just wanted to clarify some things, not only for my colleagues, but also for the public. So in our policy, it does refer to the fact that we should have a budget that aligns with the strategic plan. And I know that even before Commissioner Davis came on, that we have all been talking about putting together a solid strategic plan. And in that time, leadership has switched. Many things have happened. Now, while that frustrates me, that we're not necessarily on point with how we need to be on point with this policy, we also received that it came at such a time where we can't push out our budget in order to align. So when you say that you don't want to necessarily have these same questions and conversations next year, I do think that we are going to have these questions and conversations next year, but that it's on a better timeline, because then we would have already gone through the DE's report, have it approved by the state, or switch it up in the way that we need to have it switched up. But unfortunately, which is why I get frustrated sometimes as being in this position as well, is that we either can say no to a budget just because it hasn't followed every single thing that we have on paper. But unfortunately, it's come at a time where we're put in a difficult position where then I would say that we have to put students first. And so if students first means that we are about to pass a budget, which I will say that in many of the areas, we have addressed those things with special ed, making sure there's funding. We talked about programming that we're gonna cut because it just hasn't given us the return on investment based on the materials and information that we have received back. And so while I was conflicted in regards to us even voting tonight, because I really don't want to go back and forth with city council, because I really wanted to be truly collaborative, I know that at the end of the day, if we don't start to move things forward in a way that is, like Vice President Elliott said, constructive, then we're just going to continue to spin wheels in a circle, and we're literally not going to move the needle. But I do want to let you know, Commissioner Davis, that I hear you, because I struggle with that as well. And I know other commissioners struggle with that too, in regards to just the timeline of when we have to make decisions. And this is another reason why I talk again about how we can't just collaborate with each other in local government. Like, we have to collaborate with the state and have them understand that certain timelines, or when they drop things on us, like, we are put in constraints, just like this one that we're in right now. And so I have more requests. However, I am going to support the budget tonight. But I do think that the questions that you raised tonight and that everybody has been raising over the past year, even before you got here, that is going to lend us to a better position next year once we get through the DE report and we have solidified the next superintendent.
Thank you. I did call the question, which would mean we would have to vote. Did I get a, no, I did not. I get a motion to discuss, and I think I already did that. Yeah, I think we did. All right, so I called the question. We're going to vote. All those in favor of Resolution 827, say aye. Aye.
No, roll call vote, isn't it? Isn't it supposed to be a roll
I
call
don't think
vote?
you have to, but
I
we can
think
do a
in here
roll
it
call
says roll
vote.
call.
We can do a roll call vote. Why don't we start at this end, Commissioner LeBron? Yes?
Yes.
Mr. Hallmark? Commissioner,
Yes.
Vice President Elliott? I'm a yes. Commissioner Davis?
I believe that's what's in good interest of the children is a budget plus a plan, accountability, and effective program, so I say no.
Okay, no. Commissioner Powell? What was it captured as? Yeah. I
No.
would assume that was a no.
Yes.
Commissioner Shepard?
Yes.
All right. The yeses have it. The resolution regarding the 2019-2020 has passed. Commissioner Powell has aptly stated our thanks. It's a lot of work that's been put into it. There's been some give and take. Even today, I think I saw a lot of that. So not only thanks to Dan and your team, your entire team, I'm sure you will give them your direct thanks, but also I would thank the full board. Our superintendent has one other thing that he wants to discuss. It'll be very brief.
Real quick thing. First of all, to thank the staff. The piece were, I mean, they've been amazing. The piece we're missing is we've got a budget. We've had strategic plans before, forever. It's our actions haven't matched what are in the strategic plan. And I feel like folks are moving in that direction, and that's where we'll end up. I have for you a little reading assignment. This is our school improvement plans are coming to you. And we have another way of doing it so you don't have to read all 52 of them. So look at this. We'll discuss it at the next board meeting. Okay, so we'll just look it over. We'll discuss it at the next meeting. Many hands make light work, okay? And again, thank you for your support.
Can I get a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Been moved by Vice President Elliott, seconded by Commissioner Hallmark. Everybody have a nice night. Thanks for coming.
Thank you, guys.
I need these people.
The only thing I would just share, you don't want to